and I want to do a presentation on load because load is always a bit of a hot topic. Um, and we're in this sort of mind frame with load where if we haven't had a certain type, we almost feel underprepared for playing. And it's really, really strange still, even guys within the program, we get them out of pain and feeling good, but there's still this sort of little leprechaun in the back of the mind saying, but I haven't loaded so much. Most of the time, that goes back to the traditional sort of strength work that I said we rally against. We rally against the timing of it. Okay, there's no real strength work that is bad per se. It's just the implementation type and timing. Okay, so what I wanted to do today is just talk through those different types of load because they are very different and they don't all happen in the gym, the weight room. So we need to understand them, and a big part of my programming is understanding these and know when we put them in for the right time, for the right player. Okay. So traditionally, load is seen as straight up and down, compressive load, like the middle point here. This is what everyone really does at the moment. I would say 99% of cricketers, if they are on a gym program, this probably accounts for 90% of their plan. And most of the time, it's the same stuff. We know we've got squats, deadlifts, chins, bench press, dips. And then if someone's getting really fancy, they'll do a single leg lunge, they'll do a step up, something like that. And then as a side point, just going single leg doesn't make something functional and specific. Okay, but that's another topic. So, what sort of types of load have we got? Let's start with compressive. Like we said, that's the one everyone knows about, and that's the one everyone's stuck in, to be honest. So, compressive load is just almost straight down with the body. Okay, so if you've got a barbell on your back or you're lifting it up from the floor, the body's compressing, the muscles are compressing, and the forces, could be quite high through the body. My main issue with the squat is the position the body gets in. When we understand the role of the rib cage and the thoracic and the diaphragm, the pelvis and the lumbar, and the ways that we talk about how the extension pattern, in the pelvis and the lumbar interplay with that extensive forces and the lateral flexion forces, obviously, that go into stress fractures and back injuries. We know we don't want to be retraining that pattern with a squat. It's just crazy. But there are benefits, obviously, to normal compressive single plane. So when we say single plane, we're talking straight up and down. Okay. Sagittal plane, we call it. In bilateral, mostly, is when both feet are on the floor. So, when both feet are on the floor, we can fool the body to a certain extent. We can lift and think we're in a good place because, we can compensate. When we see a squat most of the time, when we see a deadlift, when we see a chin, pull-ups are one of the biggest areas I think that people go to and start smashing them out left, right, and center without thinking of technique, without thinking of compensation patterns. And it's almost as bad as the squat in terms of we see, people hanging there, initiating from one side, going into extension to try and get up. And it's horrendous. For the top half, as well as the bottom half, squats, we're thinking, well, bottom half, lumbar spine and below. But with pull-ups, we're thinking top half. Same with bench press. And that's the issue with most of these compressive exercises, is making sure the body's ready for it. And that's what we're all about, is making sure we're laying the foundations so that if we do need to do this, and we will be dosing some of these, we might be doing a hip thrust, we might be doing a deadlift, we might be doing a rack pull, we might do an incline dead start press, something like that, then we know the body's ready for it. Okay. So that's compressive. Now, the other two are the big ones that people aren't really sure, but don't really understand. So we've got tensile and we've got shear. So let's start on tensile. This is one of the ones that, whilst you're on the program, you're probably sort of doing for the first time. And this is more the isometrics. And with isometrics, then you've almost got two different levels. You've got one where we're really trying to help the body, in another where we're doing a little bit more positional. Okay, so the other one we call long under load. And I love this for tendon health. Check the spelling there. So these are the two sort of areas of tensile load that we really like to do. Now, we probably start more with long under load. So say things like a single leg bridge, you know, either with the shoulders on the floor or the shoulders up, you know, something like that. That is what we're talking about with long under load. And that's where we go through the whole gamut of areas of muscle endurance and fatigue, but actually remodeling the pattern and working around the fascia. I mean, the fascia is unbelievably important. We could do, and we will do a whole presentation on fascia. But to start with, let's just think of these two things. So we've got long under load. So we think that's 30 seconds or more. Okay. And positional, which would be less than 10 seconds. So it's really crucial to understand the role, because positional, there's a little bit more force going on there. Okay, so if you think of the back foot contact, heel press, or sorry, midfoot press, where we're pushing up against the bar or pushing up against the door frame, that's a maximal exertive force. So because that's positional as well, we're going to be doing less than 10 seconds. Okay. But if we're doing something like a single leg bridge hold, you know, we could be going up to a minute there. And then we're thinking of things like the bird dog holds. And these are all about muscle health, lengthening the tissue, but having load while lengthening. They're similar to some of the Pilates type movement, to be honest. In Pilates, good Pilates, I've always been a fan of. Obviously, yoga, not so much. So those are the two types of tensile isometric loads that we use, but crucial, so much more crucial in remodeling than this, okay, than the compressive. So really important that we have that, obviously, for positional, and if we think of all the back foot contact type work, the front foot contact type work, but also when we're doing that, then getting a little bit of oscillation there with the vibration. You know, if we're using a vibration deck, vibration platform, you know, we're seeing that whole remodeling process around the fascia, which is called Davis's law, so much better and so much quicker. Okay. But then we have shear. Now, shear is an interesting one because shear is more omnidirectional, you know, all different planes of motion type work that the body really, really needs. Okay. In a little story on shear, in America, they had this massive greenhouse where they were trying to grow these fantastic trees. Okay, so they thought, right, we'll give them the ideal conditions for them to grow. And the trees were growing, and it was all looking fantastic. You know, it was a massive high place, and the trees grew to the height of the greenhouse. But then something strange started happening. They started to wallow a little bit, and then start to crumble. And then when they looked into it, what they discovered is that because they'd given it everything they thought it needs, it wasn't then subject to actually out in nature with the different forces, with the wind, with the weather, with these things that you actually become resilient against. Okay. So that is what we think with things like shear. You know, if we're in the gym and we're just doing this and we're looking great, we're going straight up and down, we're doing 150K squat, we're doing 200K deadlift, we're doing 120K bench, we're feeling great. Suddenly you take them outside the gym environment, put a ball in the hand, the wind's coming down, we bowl uphill into it, pitch is a bit soft, all that gym stuff doesn't make much of a difference there. Okay. And that's the key with shear. Now, the other thing with shear is like you hear in the name, we've got to be careful of it. We've got to be careful. We can't just base a whole plan around shear. Otherwise, we're going to run into trouble. Just like every, if you do a whole plan around any of these on their own, there's going to be issues. So we need to know when and where. Okay. And one of the big areas we use, obviously, here is the Mediball. But it's about dosing with the Mediball, not doing everything all the time with the Mediball. So, I mean, you know, the way we use it with positions, with hip shoulder separation, how we're doing it before we bowl to make sure we're patterning with the feet. That's where this comes in. But that's where also we've got to be smart with the weight. This is why with any overhead work, I don't like going heavier than a 2K because we got to think of the moment arm. And this comes back a little bit to physics. So if we're above head with a 2K, we're a little bit safer than if we've got, say, a 5 or a 10K, you know, trying to throw, because it's about the kinematics as well. So shear is really, really important. And what it is something we go on as well is then mixing parts of these together. Now, I love mixing isometric work with Mediball work. So obviously, that's mixing tensile with shear, because I put a post out yesterday, front contact position, when isometrically we're holding almost up to the trunk, but then we might be moving the thoracic off it. Could be other ways as well. It could be holding that and moving the hips. You know, it could be working on that hips coming round, keeping isometric and side on with the body, but rotating the hips at the bottom. Okay. So it's using each of them when you need to. Okay. And that's the really, really big thing to understand here. When do I need that? When do I need that? When do I need that? Again, most of the time, so I'd say at the moment, or when people come to us, they're probably 90% here with 10% here. And that's just from the neck. That's just from bowling at the net. So we're not helping to prepare the body for that. We're just doing the end of user experience, which is the bowling. And then we know that this to this doesn't give us much protection at all. But if we change that up and get into slightly different percentages, you know, then we're in it. So say if we're doing 40 there, 40 there, 20 there, we might be in a much better position. Okay. But some people might be opposite. We might need to go to 60 there, 20, you know, it could be anything. It all depends on your end. This is why we need to know how your body moves. Okay. If we don't know what's going on with your body, if we don't see bowling footage, if we don't see training footage, if we don't see medicine ball footage, and if we don't just hear about how you actually feel, then it gets really hard, because then we're like, okay, we're not quite sure, and then we have to guess, and we don't want to guess. We want to be able to be spot on. I'm going to say, right, this is what you need for now, and this is why it changes during the year. You know, we could be in the season and we actually need a little bit more compressive to help the body if we've got a hell of a lot of shear going on. Or we then use a bit more tensile, so we haven't got the contractive element going on, less DOMs, that sort of thing. Okay, so this is why it's really important to know each of them, what they are, when we do them, and why it helps you. Okay, cool. Hopefully that's come across well. If you've got any questions, please shout.